If you're looking for a budget-friendly Core XY fully enclosed 3D printer, the FlashForge Adventurer 5M Pro might just be the machine for you. A bit over a month ago, FlashForge reached out and offered to send us the Adventurer 5M Pro to test on the channel and do a review on. And they sent us the machine without any strings attached. They wanted us to do a video with an honest review, and I was happy to oblige. I've been printing a lot with this machine, and there are a lot of things that I really like, and there are about 4 things that I don't think are the greatest, and we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about the unboxing experience, what the machine came with, and my overall thoughts, and whether or not I think that you should be interested in purchasing this machine. Overall, the unboxing experience of the machine was pretty fantastic. It was packaged incredibly well, and you'll find everything that you need inside. I don't really have footage from the unboxing because we unboxed it on a live stream, which is what we do when we're sending a printer for review now. If we get a new one, it goes on stream. It's a lot more fun to be able to interact with you guys, so make sure you're subscribed to check out notifications when we go live with a new printer unboxing. Inside, you're going to get your standard affairs, you're going to get your side snips, you're going to get your Allen keys, but there's one thing that this machine came with that I haven't seen another 3D printer ship with. The Adventurer 5M Pro actually shipped with this. This is a bottle of 3D printing bed adhesive. Basically, if you've been around 3D printing for a while, I'm sure you've heard that you need to put glue stick or hairspray down on your print bed, and that's basically what this is meant to replace. You might have heard of a project called Magigoo, and Bamboo has their own version. Basically, this liquid is an adhesive that you apply to your build plate. It's like a mop type marker, and once it dries, you do get really good first layer adhesion from my experience with other similar products. And I think it's a really cool idea that they shipped the machine with this instead of something like a basic glue stick. It seems like a really good way forward. That's something that is just, it's different with the FlashForge versus other machines. Throughout my testing, I didn't try this, regrettably, because I was getting really good first layers with this machine. You see, it's got calibrations built in just like every other big name printer does nowadays. It's going to set Z offset, it's going to automatically bed level, it's going to do basically everything from those to input shaper, and I'm getting really good prints so far and didn't really want to mess around with putting anything on the build plate. But if you're having issues with first layer adhesion or you need your prints to release a little bit better, definitely give it a try. They do recommend that you use it, but their build plate that comes with the machine is pretty spectacular, so I didn't really feel like I needed to try it. In addition to your standard tools and some really awesome bed adhesive, you are also going to get a spool holder in the box, and that's my first complaint with this machine is it's a rear mounted spool holder. I'm getting pretty annoyed with those. So you can see from the pictures that we took of this machine, I actually printed a side mounted spool holder. And I had that printed before the machine even showed up because I knew it had a rear mounted spool holder. That's one of my biggest gripes, and that's probably a personal complaint because of how I put my machines flat against the wall. Basically, I'm trying to maximize as much desk space as possible with that, and it's easier for me to load spools off on the side. And clearly some other folks experience that as well because there's models for these side slung spool holders for several Core XY enclosed machines like this one. So I would like to see maybe in the future the printers like this start coming with the option. Maybe there's mounting brackets on the side as well as the rear. In terms of overall footprint, this machine is not super huge, and in terms of build volume, it's pretty well average. You're going to get a 220 by 220 enclosed Core XY 3D printer that is capable of printing higher temperature materials like ABS because the hot end is rated to go up to 280 degrees Celsius. So you're going to be able to print your common materials such as PLA, ABS, ASA, PETG, TPU, basically anything that's not a crazy engineering grade filament. And some people in the live stream seem to think this machine wasn't going to print ABS very well. And in my experience, that wasn't the case. I didn't have any issues with the chamber reaching temperature. The plastic sides of the enclosure are all sealed, so when the door and the lid are closed, it's trapping heat fairly well. And my experience with ABS, which we're going to talk about more in depth later in the video, was really good. So personally, I think that the enclosure works out very well. This machine is also going to have 2 filtration options, one for internal circulation where it's going to circulate the air through the enclosure and try to keep the temperature warm, and then another to actually exchange the air in the printer with fresh air from the outside. So basically, you're going to keep air moving, and if you're printing something that you don't want to get hot, then you're going to be able to bring fresh air in to keep it cool. And if speed printing's your game, there's also an auxiliary part cooling fan, very similar to what you're going to see on like the Creality K1C and the Bamboo Lab series of machines. I really think that that's a nice touch. Personally, I'm not chasing speed benchies, and I've had some hit and miss experiences in the past with auxiliary part cooling fans causing too much cooling and causing prints to warp off of the build plate. And that's not something that I'm alone in. So, when you're using these auxiliary part cooling fans, just be sure to make sure that your parts are positioned appropriately, or you actually test it to make sure how that's going to work. This machine's also well equipped with a couple of other things that in the past we consider to be upgrades. There's a light bar inside the machine, and I think that the placement is absolutely perfect. You see, it's right inside the door at the top, so it's going to shine towards the back of the printer instead of off to the side like you're going to get on a Bamboo or the Creality machines. You're going to get much better illumination where you're looking. And the camera, well, that's my second complaint with this machine. I don't know what exactly the specs the camera have. However, it's not great. So we're going to go ahead and roll a time lapse so you can see what it looks like. It's not the greatest quality, definitely usable, and you can monitor it from your phone. However, it could be better. Cameras are getting cheap, and the light inside the machine I don't really think is an issue. So that's something I would like to see FlashForge improve in an updated version. Let's get a little bit better camera on this thing. It's got everything else. I realize we're chasing a budget point, but I think that's one area where we don't necessarily need to skimp out. One of the biggest things, and one of my favorite features, this may seem small to some, but it's actually going to be the build plate. Now, initially, I was a bit taken aback because with this plastic handle, it feels kind of proprietary, and I don't like it when you have things that it's really difficult to get outside of the manufacturer. That's one of my complaints with Bamboo, and it's interesting. So this plastic handle is actually really solid for grabbing a hold to remove your parts, but what I really love on this textured build plate is when you're attaching it to the magnetic base inside the printer, there are indexing points. So as you can see, there's these two little tabs at the back of the printer where you just slide this build plate in and it magnets down. That is so clever. I've seen machines that use like indexing pins like on a Prusa. My Bamboo has a couple of cutouts. However, this I think might be my favorite. The actual carriage that holds the bed is like injection molded plastic, and it has those little indexing points, and it's basically impossible to misalign your build plate, which is something that I genuinely struggle with and have to give it a couple of tries. This is pretty well one and done, and the magnet is strong. It is stout. I have zero doubts that my build plate is going to stay where I left it. And the build plate is pretty thick stock, so if you do have an ABS print that's trying to warp, it's not going to take the build plate with it most likely, like you're going to see on some thinner magnetic plates. So we've talked about the size, we've talked about the build plate, and some of the really cool features this machine has. But FlashForge claims that this machine can print at speeds of up to 300 millimeters per second. I didn't try that. I don't care about super crazy fast print speeds. I like my prints to be done reliably and quick, and the stock profiles are doing that. But one of the things that you have to enable print speed like that is a hot end that can handle the throughput. And that's some of FlashForge's secret sauce. One of the things that makes this machine magical is the hot end. So what I'm holding here is a 0.6 millimeter hot end that they sent in the box with the printer, and it comes with a 0.4 pre-installed. What's really, really special with this machine is it's completely toolless hot end swaps. In fact, you don't have to worry about connectors or anything. This machine has a hot end that already has a JST connector, I believe, built right in. This thing feels really robust. It's got a copper heatsink, and hot end swaps are completely toolless. Basically, you power off the printer, you pop the faceplate off, push these two red tabs in, and pull straight down. And when you're ready to pop a new one in, you just slide it up into place until you hear the satisfying click, and it's seated. This is one of my favorite toolless hot end systems. The Bamboo A1 series do a really good job with this, and it's really hard to complain about. But this, in my opinion, kind of takes the cake. One thing that's really interesting about these hot ends is FlashForge suggests that if you use a higher temperature material, like ABS for example, you don't then reuse the same hot end for something like PLA or TPU that's going to print at a lower temperature, which, I kind of love the idea of that. You have one set off to the side for whatever material you're using, and that's the only material you put through it. But these hot ends that come in 0.25, 0.4, 0.6, and 0.8 millimeters are $35 a piece. Now, you don't have to worry about tools, you don't have to worry about silicone boots or anything. So to have a couple on hand, that's not terrible, but definitely not the least expensive component about this, and that's probably because the technology that's crammed into it. Proprietary hot end means they can name the price whatever they want it to be. So personally, I'm probably not going to stick with that recommendation. I've used the same 0.4 that's already installed on the machine for PLA, ABS, and TPU, which I used for all the test prints for this printer, and it's been just fine. I've had to purge a lot to go from ABS to TPU, but other than that, I haven't had any issues. Now, that is my personal experience, and the manufacturer does recommend using separate hot ends. Again, personally, probably not gonna do that, but you have been warned, your mileage will vary, so take some caution when you're doing this. This machine doesn't exactly boast a premium price point either. You're looking at $5.99 normal price, and as of the time of filming, it's on sale with FlashForge and on Amazon for $4.99, so there will definitely be links in the description. But one side effect of that is the outside of the machine doesn't exactly have a premium feel to it. Your lid and your doors are both going to be plastic. Now, personally, I don't think that's going to be an issue because all these pretty glass doors and lids are just something else to shatter and break. If you crack a piece of plastic, it's not going to explode into shards all over your work surface. It's just going to have a crack in it, and you can put some unsightly tape over it. It doesn't seem like it affects how the machine holds the temperature, and a cool side effect is because the lid is plastic, instead of having to be completely removed from the machine like on the Creality or the Bamboo machines, you just open it up like a hatch, which I really like that, and you can print models to just keep it propped open. Now, if you're limited in your workspace's Z height, then you might be in for some trouble. Personally, I don't have anything that lives above my printer, so it's gonna be fine. A cool thing you're gonna find on the outside plastic enclosure though is there are actually small handles at the bottom. Now, they're really good for resting your hands on the inside, so if you have to move this machine around, which I have several times, then they're really convenient. It helps keep you from having to grab underneath the bottom of the machine, and it's just overall pretty darn convenient. I suggest if you're going to do this, you have the back of the machine towards your chest because that's where most of the weight is. So as you lift it, it's going to tilt towards you instead of away from you. And I highly doubt you want to drop your brand new 3D printer. Interacting with this machine couldn't be more straightforward. You have a power button on the front, big points for that, and the touchscreen is pretty okay. It's decently responsive. It's not a fancy high gloss screen, but it gets the job done. And you can navigate around just by pushing where you want to go. It's not the fastest, it's not the slowest, it's not the prettiest, but it works. And when it comes to the connectivity on this machine, I really love everything that's going on. There are two different cloud options. You can plug this thing in with Ethernet, or you could just connect locally via Wi-Fi and send your prints over that way. So you have options, and if you don't like being locked into using a cloud, or you don't want to set up the whole LAN only stuff, you can still just send prints to the printer from the IP address using your preferred slicer. Most of them have network connectivity built in these days anyway. So speaking of preparing prints and sending them via a slicer, this brings me to the next major fault that I have with this machine. So this machine seems to be running some version of Clipper that's potentially locked down, or at least behaves like Clipper. and I do know that you can actually put full clipper on it. The issue is FlashForge went through the hassle of doing 2 slicers. So instead of just spending time and energy making really good Orca slicer profiles, what they did was they have their own skin of Cura, and they now have their own skin of Orca slicer. What's the point? I do not understand. And where this starts to cause some issues is you can't natively use the device monitor tab in Orca Slicer, or Bamboo Studio for that matter, to see what your printer's doing or control it. You can send prints directly, but you have no idea what's happening within the slicer. You have to be using either FlashForge's version of Orca Slicer or FlashPrint, which is their skin of Cura. Personally, I don't use Cura. The interface doesn't jive with me. It just doesn't work in my brain. So that left me to using the other version of Orca Slicer. And frankly, I've kind of stopped doing that. It's a bit of an inconvenience, but I just use the regular Orca Slicer and hope that in the other room the printer is running fine. Which, I mean, you could use their app, which is pretty good. It looks really familiar, very similar to Bamboo Handy, but I guess at least there's comfort in familiarity. All right, we've talked about how the machine looks. We've talked about how the machine works. We've talked about what makes it work, but we haven't talked about the prints yet, and that's honestly the thing that I'm most excited about, is the print quality on this machine without having to do any tuning. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, FlashForge includes a small spool of filament with the machine, and mine came with their beautiful burnt titanium. It's like a 250 gram spool of filament, but instead of just giving you a coil of filament in a bag, they actually give you a little baby-sized spool, and I love that. It actually makes it to where you can use the sample. So, as has become customary when we're doing printer unboxing streams, the very first thing that I sliced and printed was this Sharpie pen cap cover that makes it look like a sword. And this burnt titanium is gorgeous. Now, personally, I think that they included this filament for 2 reasons. One, it is absolutely gorgeous, and I definitely still need to buy a spool. Number 2, it's a glittery filament that's got some pearlescence going on. And those types of filaments do hide print flaws very well. But at a close inspection, I don't really see a lot. There's some very minor stringing, but this printer stock is producing some of the very best top layers that I have ever seen on a 3D printer. And the walls, the layers look very neatly stacked. Now, I do personally think that the bottom layer is a bit far away. I don't like how not smushed that it looks, but the proof's in the pudding. The print stuck, it came out fantastic, and I'm incredibly happy with it. So, after we printed the pen cap, I figured we needed to print something big to show off that gorgeous filament. So, what better for a dark bluish purple than printing a Gengar? And these low poly Pokemon, which we've done a lot of, are fantastic because they have some straight surfaces, they have some curves, and they do a really good job of forcing print artifacts to show up because of the different textures. And there is some slight, and I do mean slight, evidence of ringing and some infill ghosting. But I would give this print using a stock profile and no tuning a solid 7.5 out of 10. I don't like tuning profiles, so the fact that I could get something that looks so good right off the printer without tuning makes me so happy. Now, those 2 prints were done in the FlashForge PLA, and when I took the machine home to test over the last few weeks, you know I had to throw some New Maker's filament in there, and their red is spectacular. One of the things that I think is most important when it comes to testing out a 3D printer is checking for tolerances and dimensional accuracy. So I like to do print in place models, which is something I print a lot of. I love practical prints, but as much as I love practical prints, fidget toys take the cake for me. And this square bolt, which was trending on printables, came out flawlessly. The tolerances are just top notch. Everything is buttery smooth, and the walls look great. The top and bottom are phenomenal. So Using that same red, we moved over to this awesome herringbone fidget spinner, and it'll just go. Especially after you get it broken in, it just goes and goes. So it's in close-ups of this one, so you can check and see what the print quality looks like and just how well it actually goes. Keeping in with the Pokemon theme, I thought it was important to print something actually useful. And that brings me to my first, second, third, and only print failures on this machine. I found this Vulpix on printables. It is a low poly Vulpix planter. Its head's hollow. And it looks really, really good, printed in New Maker's Red. But the model had an issue. The bottom wasn't completely flat, and a very large portion of it actually was attempting to print as a bridge. I didn't realize that. So I spent an entire evening trying to chase in my Z offset and tuning it on the go, which, by the way, you can only tune the Z offset on this printer while it's running, so basically baby stepping. You can't do it at any other point. But I spent a lot of time trying to get that dialed in, and I thought there was an issue with my new FlashForge. It turns out it was the model, so I actually just took and cut a few layers off the bottom, and you see the results. I got a really, really good looking Vulpix. So after spending a week in testing PLA, I decided that we needed to test something a little bit higher temperature, and I wanted to prove the naysayers wrong that this machine could do ABS quite well, so that's exactly what I did. I wanted something useful out of ABS, and personally it's really hard to find something to print when I know I need to print something, but I settled on this. It's a little print in place folding phone stand. And I printed this in some KVP, Keene Village Plastics, which is a local filament company to me, ABS that I've had for a really long time. So part of the print quality isn't exactly the greatest. It's been open and I didn't dehydrate it. It was full send while we were testing the machine. But the part that the machine was responsible for, phenomenal. It looks great. There's evidence of some zitting, and the top layer isn't the cleanest, but I tend to see that with ABS and ASA prints a lot, so not super concerning. The hinge folds, and it holds my phone pretty well. Of course, I had to do something fun in ABS while I was at it and test for tolerances outside of that, so another fidget toy. This one is a herringbone spinner that has a planetary gear inside of it, and it did really well. And it seemed like some of my print issues went away, which made me really happy. Well, looking for one last ABS test print before moving on to something a little bit more difficult, I found this. It is a print in place little disc launcher, and it shoots discs super quickly. Basically, there's just a plunger that you push forward and it releases the discs. And it was not a very long print. I was able to print one disc launcher and 4 discs in under 45 minutes using the stock ABS profile from Orca Slicer, and frankly, this thing is awesome. It shoots discs super fast, and definitely something that I'm going to be printing a lot of in different materials. It's a quick enough print, it's fun, and it's a really cool little mechanism. So super happy with that performance. I could have stopped testing there and been happy. ABS and PLA are the two filaments that I do the most printing with. But I thought that you guys would want to see something just a little bit more complicated. So I did load up a TPU print, and I don't do a lot of TPU printing. I have a spool on hand, and I've had it for quite some time. It's an older spool of Sane Smart 95A in blue, of course. I know, you're so surprised. But I figured since I don't like having a phone case and haven't had one on for months, I would make a lightweight phone case that actually helped to reflect some of my personality. And this thing is super squishy. It looks really cool. And I got this cool hexagonal pattern, you know, the hexagon, the bestagon, because I printed it with no top and no bottom layers. So this is actually the infill. And this phone case is super durable feeling. And it just snaps right on and fits like a glove. Now, I'm probably not going to use this thing for very long because I'm a big MagSafe person, MagSafe windshield mounts and chargers, and this case gets in the way of that. However, it does look really cool and does a great job of protecting my phone. So that's a really cool thing. Don't do a lot of TPU prints. It used to scare me, but a machine like this one, it just handles it really well. And for a modern, super fast, fully enclosed Core XY machine with the amount of development that this one had, I would hope that it would handle your common materials very well. And frankly, the print quality does not leave me upset in the slightest. One thing that did catch me off guard though was actually how you change the filament out. So on most 3D printers, you're going to back the old filament out. Or in the case of like all of my bamboo printers, they're going to cut the filament and then it's going to retract out and you're going to be left with a flush end. Well, the FlashForge does it a little bit differently. You see, what you can see in this close-up is the Bowden tube does not actually clip into the extruder head. The reason for that is when it comes time to change the filament, you pull the Bowden tube, cut the old filament, and then start loading the new. And it works out really well. I was initially concerned and thought I was going to have a problem with this system, but ended up really liking it. So it is different, and that's why it made me nervous, but it works a treat. You just tell it which filament you want to load, and away you go. Special thanks to our Level 3 channel members, Snail3D and Nathan Wolford. Your support goes a really long way for helping the channel, and if you want to get involved and help the channel grow, be sure to like this video and share with a friend. So, the machine prints great. It comes with a lot of really nice things in the box, and the unboxing experience gets you up and printing inside of 15 minutes or so, and I think that's truly fantastic. Personally, I do have my gripes, like the screen's not the greatest. I don't like the fact that they didn't just give you a full version of Clipper. The slicer is not the best. For future reference, please just give us full access via Orca Slicer or just give us the profiles. And that'll be fine. You don't have to go through the headache of developing a whole slicer to make things work. But I think overall this machine is a really well put together package. The parts on it all feel high quality, and I'm not left with anything to truly be desired. It has everything that I would personally upgrade and put on a machine. Even some things that I don't really care about at all, like the auxiliary part cooling fan, just I don't really do anything with them. I have it turned off on my P1S. But I suppose that begs the question, how exactly does this compare to a Bamboo P1S, which is the machine that it's most targeted at? And personally, I think it compares really well. It's a fair amount cheaper, and it's an alternative. A lot of people don't like bamboo for one reason or another, and I personally think that the FlashForge poses a really solid alternative. And if I were to purchase a new 3D printer tomorrow, it would be really hard for me to choose between the two. I think that the FlashForge is well put together. There are a lot of things that are thought out. The inspiration is definitely there. You can see that they drew some inspiration from the Bamboo series of machines, and that's okay. They put their own spin on it, and that's what design's about, is taking inspiration where you can and making it your own, and I'm personally fine with that. The direct drive extruder works great. The power loss recovery tried to kick in a couple of times. Personally, that's a feature I don't care at all about. Let me know in the comments, do you care about power loss recovery? Has it ever actually saved a print for you? It hasn't for me. I didn't use the filament runout sensor. I had full spools throughout all of testing, but overall, I think it's a really solid machine, and FlashForge definitely deserves your attention with it. I have recommended this printer before based off of feedback that I've heard from others in the community, and I will definitely continue to do so. In fact, I'm so happy with this machine, and frankly, FlashForge as a company. They've reached out a couple of times since I got the machine just to touch base and see how things were going. They've been incredibly friendly and very responsive. They've been a fantastic company to talk to and work with, and I hope to build a relationship with them and keep testing their products in the future. They didn't want any creative input. They didn't want to pay me for this video. They just provided the printer and just wanted to check in and make sure that I was enjoying the product. And personally, that's a company that I think I can stand with. I think that you would have a great experience with this machine, and I enjoy it so much that when this channel hits 5,000 subscribers, I'm going to give one away. Last time we did the Anycubic Cobra Go, which is still sitting there, still waiting for the reply to that email. hit me up, you know who you are. But when the channel hits 5,000 subscribers, we're giving away a FlashForge Adventurer 5M Pro. And that is something that I'm going to buy out of my pocket and ship to you, anyone in the United States, the continental United States, and we're going to have a blast with this thing. As we're approaching Christmas time, having another fast printer around for toy drive prints is going to be fantastic. So if something happened and I needed another printer tomorrow, would I purchase a FlashForge Adventurer 5M Pro? Absolutely I would.